Gary, Marty and me, my story of living with a double brain tumour diagnosis and how humour and positivity helped me to cope. Episode 12, Operation Day. Hi, I wanted to share a brief summary of my time in hospital, in the hope that it helps remove the worrying unknowns about Operation Day, and also to try and change your minds towards the hospital environment itself. Knowledge of what to expect from friends on the Brain Tumour Charity Facebook page, plus my own personal experience of my wife spending her career working in the NHS, certainly helped me. I had a busy weekend on the run-up to my operation because of my second tumour. On the Saturday, I went to a small hospital in Otley in Yorkshire for a final PCR test, following which I was to isolate. However, my neurosurgeon for my glioma, my second tumour, Mr. Matthew, wanted an updated scan to ensure that Gary the glioma was being a good boy. So despite isolating, on the Sunday I attended an external MRI scanning unit based at Leeds St James Hospital, but apparently run by the private sector. The unit was immaculate and the staff super efficient and friendly, so I was not there for long. Monday was my last day of normality in some respects, so I slowly packed my bag with essentials such as chocolate hobnobs, Pringles, Whittaker's chocolate from New Zealand and a Baby Yoda hot water bottle provided by my kids. Sadly, bag size limits meant that Baby Yoda couldn't come with me in the end. Oh yes, I did take some clothes and toiletries too. I was quite emotionally drained by Monday night, but also keen to get this done. My admission time at Leeds General Infirmary was not until 12 p.m. due to some audit that was happening, but it meant that by getting up just after 5 a.m. I had time for one last big coffee and some toast before my fasting period started, although these days you can at least drink water until 2 hours before the operation. The admissions ward was still strict on visitors due to COVID-19, so I had to say goodbye to my wife at the door, and I will not pretend that this was easy. In fact, I had kept really calm through most of this, but saying goodbye upset me, and in the end I had to go off quite quickly. Once that was done though, I pulled myself together and got on with being Mr. Cheerful. The admissions team were great, friendly, calming, but direct, in that even at this point they did not have a definite ICU bed for me. Thankfully, it was only a short wait before communication came through of the bed, and then it was game on. Lots of forms to go through, questions about health, etc., but that was soon done. I then had a steady stream of visitors, starting with Mr. Shake, my neurosurgeon for the operation, who was clearly delighted that we had a go. After a brief chat he headed off to make final preparations on the theatre. Due to my surgery being quite complex, Mr. Shake was working with a second neurosurgeon, and he popped along to get up to speed and do a quick assessment of my physical state, and then he too headed off to theatre. Finally, my anaesthetist paid a visit. He was very good at explaining what I was to expect from being anaesthetised, what pain I might be in after the operation, depending on what position I would be kept in for 5 hours, even giving me some practical demonstrations, and then doing the final sign-off. Really great support. They went to great lengths to make sure that I knew everything I needed. I'm not sure how much longer I waited, not long, before the admissions nurse kitted me out with a couple of gowns for the trip to the theatre, locked my bag away for transfer to the ICU ward, and then sat me back down to wait for the nurse who was to take me to theatre. They were really good at reminding me to keep messaging my family until the last minute, even encouraging me to call my wife right up until heading to theatre. So off we went, me feeling like my bum was on display for everybody at the LGI, and I entered an almost euphoric state that this was it, the beginning of the end for Marty the Meningioma. As we arrived at the room where my anaesthetics would be done, the nurse and I were laughing about me being an attention seeker having 2 brain tumours, so I arrived into the room chuckling. I received a big, friendly hello again, Mr. Hannah, from my anaesthetist, who then took the time to introduce his team. Just hop on the bed, relax and leave the hard work to us, he said, as his team went into action putting in several cannulas, one in each hand and one in my ankle. I was then connected up to 2 machines, the first of which would essentially make me relax. OK, Mr. Hannah, I'm going to begin the main anaesthesia now. It should only take a moment before... Gone. I didn't hear the rest of what he said. For me it was instantaneous, of course, but for my family it was 5 hours of stress and waiting. Your family definitely has the tough job from the moment that you go under. When I first woke up, I apparently couldn't recognise Mr. Shake or my ICU nurse, and I have vague memories of my weedy voice answering them, followed by me being violently sick. I then passed out again for a while. When I next woke, I felt okay. Burnt out, but okay. Quite cheerful, in fact. This time, I did recognise Mr. Shake, who had just spoken to my family and let me know that they were fine too. With that, I dozed off into a deep sleep. Anyone who has stayed in hospital knows that a good sleep is not normally on the agenda, with regular observations being done, blood pressure, etc., but that's the norm. Also, sleep is difficult when you have an enormous bandage on your head, with what I believe were strategically placed knots to keep me from sleeping on my operation site. This could have been coincidence, of course, but it worked. I spent a day on ICU being very closely monitored and initially had a feeding tube, which was put in when I was under, in case my swallow function had been affected. This meant no food, and worse, no coffee. Luckily, the specialist for this came along quite early on my first day to carry out the swallow test. She carefully set out a glass of water, a tiny tub of custard and a packet of digestive biscuits, with my challenge being to test small bits to see how swallowing went. She carefully broke off a crescent of biscuit, I think with the idea that I nibbled delicately along this strip and try swallowing it, but I must have been hungry because it went down in one. "OK," she said after a short pause and a chuckle. "Not quite what I had in mind, but you passed." She left me the custard as a reward, and a few minutes later I was tube-free and supping a coffee and dunking the remaining biscuits. Bliss. Later, I had a CT scan, and the results looked great. In fact, they are pretty sure that they got 100% of Marty out. This meant that I could transfer to the high dependency unit, a ward where you are still looked after closely, but it is no longer one-to-one care as it is on ICU. I soon settled in there and was reunited with my bag and phone so I could finally talk to my wife and family. My night on HDU was a mixed bag. I didn't expect to sleep and I didn't. I was feeling very weak and mentally fatigued, with the after effects of the anaesthetic, and I think that I was hallucinating slightly because in the middle of the night I became convinced and fixated on the belief that I had actually soiled myself. Eventually I could resist no more and pressed the nurse call button. The duty sister came over and could tell that I was a bit confused and distressed, but after a quick check assured me that I was fine. They really do not get paid enough. The next day I felt great, if I'm honest, and spent the day resting, of course, but I felt up to sitting out of bed and even having a careful shower. This was an event in itself, as the shower room is in the nurse's office, so that they could hear and react quickly to what is going on, I suppose. But as they would not lock the door for safety, it meant that this two-way door would not need much to push it open. I sat for a shower, but I had a close call getting out when, covered in soap suds, I lost my balance. I reckon that if I hadn't caught myself, the suds would have let me slide naked through the door, across the office, and gently come to rest at the HDU sister's feet, like a mottled pink beached whale, and they definitely do not get paid enough to see that. Also, by now I was eating, and I like hospital food if I'm truthful. It's probably the same as with in-flight catering, you enjoy it simply because it's something to do, but I did have a cracking chili con carne. The following morning I was up again and was waiting to have a coffee with my wife and eldest daughter Rebecca. Although there were no visitors allowed on the ward, I was allowed to go off the ward to meet them, so we were going to meet up. However, my duty nurse came over and let me know that they were thinking of letting me go home. Apparently I was so bright and cheerful and my observations so consistent that it was looking like I didn't need to occupy even a standard ward bed, which would have been my next destination, so a series of visits began. A physiotherapist took me for a walk and was happy that with a stick I was mobile enough. An occupational health specialist then took me for another walk and got me to make her a coffee, which we sat and chatted over. Cushy job she has. And she then did some cognitive tests, which apart from the mental arithmetic, which I couldn't do before the op anyway, I passed easily. Finally, the wonderful Mr. Shake reappeared and said that he was happy for me to go home too, so my wife got a very unexpected call to say, "Come and fetch me, please." In total I was only in for 48 hours, which was great, and I am aware that I was very fortunate. However, my experience was a good one, made possible by dedicated and patient people who were completely focused on looking after me. I don't just mean the surgeons, nurses, radiographers, but the catering staff, who were always cheerful and friendly, the ward cleaner, who, even though busy, spared a moment to say hi and wish me well. All of these people come together to get us through what is likely the darkest time in our lives and to get us out the other side as well as possible. Just to finish, I know from chatting on the Brain Tumour Charity Facebook group that a lot of people are frightened by the unknown of the hospital and see it as this awful place where this scary thing is going to happen to them. My wife has worked in the NHS her whole career right up until her retirement. It was her second home and she does miss it. She wouldn't feel like that if hospitals were awful. Our eldest daughter is a scientist based at Addenbrooke's in Cambridge. She loves her job and, like my wife, just sees the hospital as a workplace, not somewhere to fear. So my advice is to try and see it from the staff point of view. It's their office, it's where their friends are who they have a laugh with every day, where they organise their birthday parties and have cake on their friends' birthdays. It's where they comfort their friends on down days and screech with laughter at stupid selfies and inappropriate jokes. It is somewhere that is friendly and familiar, not a house of horror. They see the hospital as a positive place dedicated to being there for us in our darkest hours. So to finish, I hope this helps to take away some of the mystery of what's to come on your operation day and to make the idea of hospital just a little bit less threatening. Thanks. Bye. By the way, like me, over 12,000 people each year in the UK and an estimated 300,000 worldwide suddenly discover that they have a brain tumour, and from the moment that they receive that news, their lives will never be the same again. This podcast has been created to try and raise funds for the Brain Tumour Charity, who've been a big support to my family and I. As well as offering support to individuals and families, they fund life-saving research in the hope of ending the harm done by brain tumours. If you can help in any way, big or small, please go to www.justgiving.com/fundraising/Stuart-Hannah, that's Stuart-Hannah, and make a donation. Thanks.